was a very exciting time. That's what I remember most. I was on a holiday and I got a frantic call. Where are you anyway? They have been looking for you. And I said, what about? Having a restoration force as big as Intramuros was at the time didn't exist anywhere in the country. When we came into Intramuros to work, what are we restoring? We do not know. How did it look, except for the ruined walls? That's why we have to dig pictures and pictures and pictures just to be able to provide a background and tell people this is important, this part of the walls look like this. Everything was something that came to us by a calling, you'd say, that we have to do it right. Intramuros is a beautiful memory of the past. It is like a microcosm of all things good and bad. There are many good stories about Filipinos, people who headed the construction of the walls, and they were Indios. The carvers were Filipinos also. People should follow the regulations more, and that they should not seek exemption all the time. And this applies to both government, church, and private owners. I'm Esperanza Bunag Gatunton. I was hired, I would say, I was one of the first employed in the Intramuros administration structure, and that was pretty 1979. You have many people saying that Intramuros should not be preserved because it is a colonial memory and that should be erased. I don't think so. It represents failure. It represents achievement. So it's about time that our people should see Intramuros is not just a symbol of colonialization, but a symbol of our spirit to rise above that.
Sa akin, special yung Intramuros dahil sa punong-puno ng historical yung Intramuros. Napamahal na rin po ako dito sa Intramuros dahil dito po ako nagtatrabaho. Ako po si Christian Roa. Ako po isang security guard ng Intramuros bilang isang katipunero po. Naitutulong ko po dito sa Intramuros na mapanatili po yung mga kalinisan, kaayusan, at matiwasay na pagpapatupad. Ni-expect ko po dito sa Intramuros dahil po sa lalong tumatagal, gumaganda siya at dumarami yung mga turista na bumibisita dito.
IA's dedication in ensuring that tangible treasures that immortalize our history are now accessible to the public is commendable.
Congratulations to the Intramuros administration. I wasn't expecting that the collection can be so amazing. It was really an awesome experience seeing all of this collection And it's like 30% only of the collection. I wish to see more. Again, congratulations.
Masasabi ko ito ay malaking isang tagumpay kasi matagal namin nakatago at hindi na i-display talaga sa public yan. Pangalawa, nagpalipat-lipat na ng location yan at ngayon, na-save natin.
Intramuros mahalaga para sa akin bilang Pilipino kasi maraming bagay sa Pilipinas dito nagsimula sa Intramuros. Well, actually, more than reviving the structures, ang gusto ko talaga maintindihan ng tao kung anong kontribusyon ng Intramuros sa pagmuno ng Pilipinas. Kasi kung walang pagkilala, walang pagmahal, hindi siya mananatili. Fernando Shalcid ako, Professor Emeritus sa Ateneo de Manila sa Department of Sociology and Anthropology. Ang mensahe ko lang, dapat mas nuanced, mas complex ang ating pagtingin sa kasaysayan. Kasi mahirap itong black and white pagtingin sa kasaysayan. Masyado moralistic, basta Kastila masama. Dapat mas three-dimensional pagtingin sa kasaysayan.
Intramuros for me is a place that tells you the story of Manila, the city that I was born in, the city that I worked in, and the city that I live in and will probably live in for the next years. My life with Intramuros began in 1999 when I started volunteering for a museum, Bahay Chinoy. And it was from there that I started doing cultural work, and eventually which led to us establishing our tour outfit in 2005. Intramuros is a place of a lot of personal memories for me because I've been coming here since I was a little boy. I remember my first trip here was in the 1980s when we had a school trip at San Agustin Museum. And I distinctly remember getting freaked out because I went to a crypt with lots of dead people, and which nobody really explained what they were. So that fascination with Manila's history, with my personal family's history, began here in Intramuros. I think what we do here in Intramuros introduces people to our city. And by introducing Intramuros to our visitors, we tell them the story and we make them understand the city, my city, Manila, what it was, how it is today, and what it will be in the future. My hopes for Intramuros is to be a place that is anchored in its past, but at the same time, it's a place that can have new ideas for the future. No? A place that will inspire people, a place that will create good memories, and a place that will make you feel good about being a Manileño. I'm Ivan Mandy. I'm a cultural guide from Old Manila Walks, and we have been doing historical walks around the old city since 2005. I see myself as a cultural worker and a storyteller. And I tell basically the story of our city. And the story of Manila begins here in Intramuros.
I'm Martin Tino Jr. My lolo became chairman of the COMELEC, and he was the one who transferred the COMELEC to Intramuros. I was in grade school. He would go home at 6 o'clock every afternoon. They pick us up at 4 o'clock, so I have to wait for him in his office. So I would go around Intramuros in the early 50s. It was all ruins. I've always been interested in old houses. I began traveling throughout the whole country. Intramuros was the biggest European city in Asia. This is our history. It defines our culture. The problem is most of our officials do not appreciate it. IA was founded. And Jimmy Laya, I didn't know Jimmy Laya. He got me as a consultant. Then we started having exhibits. The first ever on relieves, on santos, on ivory. We have all these horrible looking modern buildings. I wish they could tear it down and rebuild it properly. And in the early days, it was really a dead town. Even when Casa Manila was finished, we would make whatever pakulo just to bring in people. In the afternoon, Intramuros was empty. Empty. There was hardly any people. Since last year, I'm really amazed at how Intramuros has grown and has attracted so many people, considering the problems we had in the beginning. They have thousands of people coming here, and all of them are paying entrance fees, restaurants, all those chalets. So can you imagine? It's alive. You can see the whole thing is alive.
So naging special sa akin yung Intramuros dahil dito rin ako nakatira, so dito na rin ako kumukuha para sa hanap buhay namin. And then ang Intramuros din para sa akin is parang isang tahanan na rin para sa akin. So ang role ko dito sa Intramuros ay parang tayo nag-a-attract or nagpapa-attract sa mga turista dito sa loob ng Intramuros para kahit pa paano makita rin nila yung kagandahan ng Intramuros. Ako nga pala si Valentino Mejia, isang e-trike driver dito sa Intramuros. So ang nakikita ko sa future ng Intramuros is lalawak pa yung ating turismo dito sa loob ng Intramuros, and then talagang makikilala ang Intramuros sa buong Pilipinas, hindi lang sa buong Pilipinas, sa buong mundo.
Intramuros for me is a sense of curiosity and wonder. It's heritage and history, and it's a living experience. It's a place where you can see history come to life and where we believe there's a strong future for sustainable tourism. So bamboo is arguably one of the most sustainable building materials on the planet. We're using local Philippine bamboo that is then handcrafted into our products so that we can create jobs, but then also share a bit of Filipino design and flair with our international guests. We've been manufacturing bamboo bicycles. It is as part of a sustainable livelihood program. And here in Intramuros, we've been doing guided bamboo bike tours for now it's been about 5 years. They get to ride the bamboo bikes around these historic walls. You can explore the nooks and crannies, the different chambers and gates and parks and buildings and museums and churches and everything. The different streets here all have something exploration worthy. Bambike helps you discover Intramuros like nothing else. So my name is Brian Benitez McClelland. I'm the founder of Bambike, and we're operating Bambike Eco Tours here in Intramuros. Bambike gets to help the guests experience Intramuros from a different perspective, sharing Philippine culture, our history, and the architecture and the stories of what really were the foundational years of Philippines here in Intramuros.
As I always say before, no, whenever we say Manila, Manila was of course Intramuros, and during the Spanish period, and it was their prime city, no? And so everything that was about Philippine history and culture during the Spanish and of course the American period began and eventually developed in the walled city. And in the course of time, no, this would become also a prime urban tourism area, especially with the restoration and the heritage conservation that has been going on in the city. I think the biggest challenge for Intramuros is for it
all that like home for me is just a raggy melody. Oh, if I don't please my soul, then you can make me low. You can take away my sin, take away my food, take away my hat, and even take away my shoe. But Lordy, Mr. Man, don't you take away those blues. Don't take away those blues. What kind of music has just listen to that loving jazz? Don't take away those blues. They've got a style of playing music that just keeps you swaying. All that life holds for me when I am on a summer tree. I love a jazzy drummer. It's just a raggy melody. Don't you stop, don't you hesitate. But if those blues must go into the dark oblivion where there ain't no use to live it, then you can lay me low down in the ground where not a sound can get around. You can take away my pin, take away my food, take away my hat and even take away my shoes. But Lordy, Mr. Man, don't you take away those loving blues.
Right, so we shall start. It's already 3 p.m. Thank you everyone for coming to the 55th. Yes, this is the 55th episode of the Intramuros Learning Sessions. So for today, we're going to have a discussion on local heritage initiatives, specifically with regard to heritage houses. And this webinar is going to be our closing ILS episode for Heritage Month this May 2021. Right, so before we start on our 55th episode of the Intramuros Learning Sessions, let me remind our audience of our usual house rules. So, greetings to all those who are viewing via Zoom. By the way, if my audio is not clear enough, feel free to say so in the chat. I can speak louder. Right, so greetings to all those who are viewing via Zoom. You can raise your questions. Feel free to raise any questions that you like. You can raise them in the question and answer button below or in the chat button below the screen. So if you are viewing via Facebook as well, you can also raise your questions in the comment section below. And then later I'm going to read out loud some of the questions for the speaker to respond to on air. Right, so only those who have successfully registered and viewed on Zoom will be eligible to get a certificate, and a feedback form will be emailed to you after the session. The certificate will be sent within a week. So take note that only Zoom participants will be able to get a certificate from the Intramuros administration. And if you're viewing via Facebook now, there's still time to register for Zoom. So feel free to register for Zoom now. So, and of course, lastly, note that this webinar is recorded and that the recording shall be made permanently available in our social media channels, including Facebook as well as YouTube. So for our speaker for today, we have none other than Mr. Solomon Locsin. So Neil Solomon Lopez Locsin is a cultural worker. He grew up in the heritage city of Silay, where he started his heritage and cultural work. He is currently the Chief Tourism Officer of the Department of Tourism in Boracay Island and is also presently the Chairperson and President of the Heritage Conservation Society. The HAS is the prime mover and advocate for preservation of Philippine-built heritage through advocacy and volunteerism, impact implementation, education, and information to contribute toward the establishment of a society that preserves and values its cultural heritage. Solomon has a BS in marketing from La Salle Bacolod and a master's in public management from the Ateneo de Manila University. He was also a JICA scholar and he earned his certificate on community tourism promotion from Akita Prefecture, Japan. So without further ado, I'd like to call on Mr. Solomon Locsin for his presentation for today. Sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, John. Good afternoon,
Hi.
and
Good
good afternoon to everyone who are listening and watching us in Zoom and Facebook Live. And I would like to thank the Intramuros administration for inviting me to this Intramuros Learning Sessions. It is an honor to be here this afternoon. So, thank you. Well, our topic for this afternoon is heritage initiative for localities. I even signified its household heritage initiatives or housing our heritage. Just to give you the background, I am from Silay City. It's in Negros Occidental, and it is we could call it a heritage town. I grew up in an ancestral house. And when you say localities, it's we forget first that it's more on. We forget to go away first from the urban centers and focus on localities and communities. And in Silay, it matters to be part of a community, especially in heritage conservation. As we go further in this learning session, I just want to tell everyone that when we talk about ancestral houses or heritage structures, um, we 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 all should remember that those who built these houses or heritage structures in the span of centuries live differently from those who are currently occupying it. And eventually, these these owners, these heirs, in the future generation of owners, will have different lives compared to those in the present and those in the past. So we see the economics in that factor. But there's only one thing that is constant in heritage conservation, and that is the individual memory, the collective memory in these houses. Conservation of these structures depend in the purpose or the significance that the owners, presenters see in these structures. Purpose and significance is very important, and that is my that's how how heritage conservation works. Um, in For example, when I was part of the Visayas consultations of the Philippine Heritage Charter, I always express the importance of the household in heritage conservation, the importance of the housewives in heritage conservation, because when you don't need a windfall to preserve these houses, it's you take it day by day. Preservation, you take it day by day, and it's the housewives or the people in the household that matter. For example, they would be the ones to maintain the house in the day to day, basic cleanliness of the house, basic repairs. So if you take conservation, if you approach conservation in a more like a household approach, it tends to be less expensive because you actually live there. So we process that it is important that these houses, these heritage houses, these historical houses, remain to be livable spaces. Uh, they remain to be homes. They're not homes; they should be adaptively reused as part of of the community, as cafes, bed and breakfast, those things. It's like finding meaning in function. Uh, so going back, it's actually finding meaning. It's like what I have expressed earlier. Um, those who built these structures live differently with those who are living in the present, and of course will live differently. The people who will inherit these structures will live differently. So if there is a difference in their lifestyles, the significance and purpose comes in, and you see that the only thing constant in these families, in these cultures, in these societies, is their built heritage. It's their tangible built heritage. I I guess John will have a slide to show, so I can.
Yes, we have.
So
can you see it, po?
Yeah, it's there. Okay. Um, this is my hometown, Silay. What you are seeing right now is one of our most fine examples of adaptive reuse. It's a former residence of the family of Maria Ledesma Goles. Uh, it is a typical building or old building that built in the late nine sorry in the 1920s, and usually shops sa baba, then the residences is in the second floor. But it was purchased by RCBC, and the RCBC turned it into their bank branch and restored it. We don't have photos of the interior because for security reasons, because it's a bank. But even the interiors, you will see like going inside a bank during the time. So this restoration by RCBC came before any legislation passed. It came even before Republic Act 10,066, which is the Heritage Act. Uh, it was carried out by this corporation simply because the community calls for it, that such beautiful structure shouldn't be demolished but should be preserved. So it is very important that communities know what they want and to preserve the spirit of their place. Let's move on, John. So this is my ancestral house. It's the Locsin ancestral home. It's not open to the public, but if we get invitations for it to be opened up in advance, we open it up. We want to share the architecture and the heritage and the history of the house. So what is important in this house is that it values family. Um, our family, the Locsin family, is a big family, and we are scattered all over the world. But it is so important for them to know that there is something constant, regardless where they are or what they do. There is something constant that when they come back to their place of birth, or where the place the family came from, they will have a home to welcome them back. So that is also very important. The significance of the house. Next slide, John. So this is one of the buildings. It is part of the main poblacion area of Silay, and it continues to function. It's the first department store in Negros. It's the Severino building. So it needs it needs restoration, but it's there because there's a Republic Act that protects the houses in the city, especially in the main street. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a house that is continuously being restored by the family. It has caretakers, but it is also open to the public if for advanced bookings. So you will see that in Silay there's 31 ancestral houses being 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 continuously used. At some point of its history, this is a school. It's a preschool. So it's actually just finding a purpose for each house. So as long as it is being used, the preservation continues. So the preservation is not really just like you pull in your resources and then drop it at one point. It is a process. That is the success of the Heritage Conservation Initiative in Silay, because it's a continuing process. They started usually they would start with the roof, then proceed. So, John, let's just continue with the slide. So these are basically in the next few slides. John, can you just go through the slides? The next few slides are all 31 houses from the different from different eras. They are different architectural styles. All of this because at one point in our history, in the history of the town, the people just decided that let's preserve this because there's value, there's continuing value in preserving, and these were started as early as the 60s and 70s, and during the time Silay was not yet a tourism destination, but because they continue to give value to what they have, eventually there is already return. Before the pandemic, Silay was the main tourism destination of the region in terms of heritage, culture, and the art scene. So, like for this one, it's a bed and breakfast. And then others are adaptively reused as cafes, events places. So it's a matter of putting the community together. Usually, usually it is very difficult to sell in terms of marketing in terms of tourism. It's very difficult to sell as one particular ancestral house. So that is the value of heritage districts, heritage zones, is that there's a collective effort by the community. Um, if there's only one house being preserved and then one next door is not, it's not really put into use or it's not restored, um, why would a tourist or a guest travel all the way certain locality just to see one house? So that is how where the community comes in, that you have a collective effort. You go to this particular district and there's so many things to do. You have houses to see in different architectural styles. You have houses adaptively reused in different ways. Events, galleries, museums, a bed and breakfast. Um, these are very important. So that's why in localities the community is very important in the preservation and economizing heritage structures. So this is a bakery. It's the oldest running bakery in the island of Negros. It's almost it's almost 100 years old. The bakery is almost 100 years old. And interestingly, the house dates back to the Spanish period, but sometime during the American period, the second owner updated it. So he removed the copy shell windows and changed it to glass. Then actually there's a wrap around balcony that was removed in the house. So just like what I said earlier, they live different lives. In at different generations live different lives, but as long as you keep the the, the house as a constant in those variety of episodes in its history. Okay. So these are some of the activities in the town that are being conducted before the pandemic. So it is as we approach the new normal, it is actually heritage districts that promote wide open spaces. Um, it's easy to govern the health and safety guidelines if you're in a heritage district because it's open air. So this is the Ledesma House during the International Rundalia Festival. So we have Rundalia groups from all over the world coming to Silay, and each ancestral house adopted a Rundalia group. So, like for example, in this house, it's the Rondalla from Cainta, and actually there's a Rondalla from Thailand also performing in that house, in another house, another country, another province. So when this was happening, you get to visit almost all the houses in Silay, and you will see a musical performance during the International Rondalla Festival. So so that is how important community is, to involve the community. So this is actually not in Silay, Lisay. This is the Mariano Lacson Ancestral House. It's now in ruins, but they preserved the concrete shell. It's one of the major tourism attractions in Negros. So alongside ancestral houses, there's more to ancestral houses. There are ancestral houses as stories. There are ancestral houses has so many parts. There's the kitchen, the sala, the silong or the basement, and the ground floor, and of course the bedroom. So there are so many stories that attract tourists. These are stories in every nook of the house. So it gives something to look forward to. It becomes a magnet. So for example, in food traditions and food cultures, what were the delicacies and the cuisine that came out from the kitchen from this particular house? And as we go on as we go on in promoting our heritage districts, I discovered that these families that own the houses became more proud. So that's why we we had food festivals that share, and of course it brings in the economic factor in heritage districts. It is important to bring in investment in heritage districts. So in this particular occasion that you're looking right now, it's it's an event of Don Papa Ram. I just want to share about this event. It's it's uh it's actually a ram made of sugarcane from Negros Island that is being marketed internationally. So at every quarter of the year before the pandemic, the, this company would travel to Negros, to Silay, to Talisay, to the Gaston Ancestral House in Manapla, and they would bring in international tourists. These are captured markets, and their product is rum, but but they market it is from Negros, and about the culture that brought about the rum. The rum is from sugar. It was named after a historical figure, which we call Don Papa. So many stories came out of this product. Then of course it was also a time for rediscovering old cuisine and fusing the rum in different delicacies in Negros. So there's so many things that you can do with heritage, especially if from local cultures. Next slide, please, John. So this is the Adela Ledesma Ancestral House. It's actually it is a storied ancestral home. It was featured in so many publications because of an alleged love story. So it is eventually restored and open to the public. So when the last owner, passed away, and and she has no family, so it opens up to the public before the pandemic. So I think that they're reopening again soon. So what is very important is that those who are no longer occupied by the original families but still continue as adaptively reused destinations. Well, before there's that aura that the Negros sugar producing families are so aloof or very exclusive. So heritage districts offer everybody a chance to experience those storied lives, at some point they get to use the actual china, the actual silver, the actual glassware from these houses. Like for example, one of the latest ancestral houses that was opened in Silay is Casa Gamboa. So you see the actual things or actual tableware that the family uses being used by the public. So it gives you a very beautiful experience, and of course the owners are already are already earning from tourism. Uh, Interestingly, even during the pandemic, uh, there are quite a number of restaurants in ancestral houses that have never closed down. Uh, Ancestral houses can be booked exclusively, so health and safety guidelines are very manageable in heritage districts, especially their open air, their their open air. And well, in matter of change adaptations, especially which is the way forward, we also see the green initiative, uh, the promotion of green architecture, which surprisingly is in one way or another present in the architectural elements of ancestral houses or heritage houses. So growing trends are actually just being reused from the from the elements of how these houses were built. John, if, are we ready to answer some of our questions? By the way, this is the Tanadikang, the previous pictures. It is actually a museum, but there's an art gallery in the ground floor in the silong of the house. And the picture that you are seeing is another house. Is restored and it's also an events place. This is before the pandemic. There's a cafe. And in the next slide, Donald's is so it's so fast food chains are quite new and but they find a home in the old structures. We are always open for investment in our hometowns. Although these are quite foreign, but they are also a factor in the restoration of houses. If you see the Jollibee building, that is not an old house. That is a new building, but in order to blend in the heritage district of Silay, they they were asked to to build in the classical form. So beside it is the Bernardino Haladali Museum. So this is the Leandro de la Rama Locsin Ancestral House, the ancestral house of the national artist Leandro Locsin. So in each house there is a story. So like where did the national artist up? What influenced his career? So it goes back. So we have so many people that prominently figured nationally and internationally that went through these houses. And of course, there are stories of the common folk, their traditions, their way of life that gives interest to those who want to visit heritage districts. So, so heritage districts, especially in the provinces and the localities, are are always initiated by the community. So if you are in urban centers and you find a concentration of heritage structures, it is always our stand in the Heritage Conservation Society to find purpose and significance in these structures, in these places. It's in when the Philippine Heritage Charter was promulgated. It is always the search for significance of a place where there is meaning, which is very important. So um, we will always be facing the challenges in economics, in finances, but at the end of the day, it is a very holistic approach. It is the process of finding purpose, significance of your ancestral houses, finding the intangible in the tangible. It's identifying, and not be you may not be living you may not be living the lives of those that came before you, but you have a constant reminder through this built heritage. And of course, the rich stories that could be passed on and can be shared. It is always a shared value uh, in heritage conservation in localities. So, John, do we have questions?
Thank you so much for that talk. Now, it is very nice no, na in our discussion for local heritage initiatives, we have Silay as a case study, and it is actually very nice that we have a speaker na, who actually came from Silay who can speak directly firsthand. Now, I wasn't able to mention this earlier in the introduction, but you were previously a counselor, a member of the council of the LGU of Silay. Now, in the management of the heritage houses of Silay, can you tell us something about the LGU involvement in the management of these heritage houses? So, up to how much is the intervention, and up to how much is regulated in these heritage houses? And in your opinion, yeah, what is the acceptable? What is the extent? I mean, how much should intervention be, in your opinion?
Like what I said earlier, it's always finding significance and purpose. In Silay, we passed a heritage ordinance. So in the Poblacion area, where the 31 ancestral houses are concentrated, which were all identified by the National Historical Commission as national landmarks, you cannot demolish these structures. That's very clear. Then through the ordinance, it is being governed by the Silay City Heritage District Administration. It is being chaired by the mayor, and the members are actually the office of the building official, the city engineer, and the tourism officer. These people are the people who matter in preservation. Office of the building official clears structures in a town or city to be demolished. So if you are already part of that group, dun pa lang it's being halted already. So when you carry out legislation, there's public hearings. We were surprised that when we passed the heritage ordinance, which is you cannot demolish heritage structures within Silay, it is just a matter of putting it on paper. The understanding is there because the heritage conservation advocacy in the town started all the way back in the 60s, 70s, when there is a plan by the national government during the Marcos administration to demolish ancestral houses in the highway. So you won't see El Ijal Bakery now if that carried through. But there's an advocacy, and it was successful. So it's that it gives us also something, that a lesson to be very positive, not to be hostile with government. You can start talking to them, and they might understand. Yeah, we should be proactive. So during the time, actually, some of the ancestral house owners were already paid by the government, but eventually it was cancelled. Then that led to the declaration of a Republic Act 808 in 1995, to protect the houses. So the Republic Act actually came before the Heritage Ordinance, which is local legislation. So it is just a matter of putting it on paper. So just to add to that, John, one might think, which is the usual criticism in heritage conservation, that heritage conservation is very elitist. When this advocacy was carried out, there were signature campaigns, there were house to house initiatives, and these were carried out by everyone, by housewives, teachers, artists, from people all over walks of life, civic leaders in the church. This happened in the 70s. So I would always credit that particular time, because without that advocacy in the 70s, we might lose a large part of our built heritage. Then when it was legislated, well, of course, the government gives incentives. If you own an ancestral house, you are exempted from real property tax on your house. And then if you have a restoration project, there's an investment code which tackles particularly in restoration, and you get rebates and in a certain percentage in your restoration. So, but these are just complements in the heritage initiative. Right now, people value our heritage more, simply because, of course, there's always significance of the place and purpose, but they also saw the tourism value. Unfortunately, this was just now in slow pace because of the pandemic. But I am optimistic this will take off when the dust settles.
Thank you so much for that. Earlier, you mentioned the word elitist. Now, I'd like to zero in on that. Now, I've noticed that a lot of the structures that you presented earlier were houses of the rich, were houses of the elite. Most of them were grand houses, mansions even. So my question is, do you showcase or do you promote as well the heritage of the masses, the farmers, the servants, the ordinary people? Do you have that as well in Silay, or is it only heritage of the rich?
So when you say of Negros Occidental and Silay, it's always sugar, and sugar is not only the sugarcane planter. It is those who were behind this house, the sugar plantations. Those were behind in the kitchens that run these houses. So I can share a few examples. For example, outside the poblacion, there is what we call Hacienda Adela Folklore Village. It is actually it's a tourism destination. It's part of the heritage tour in the hometown, or even in Negros, where you get to experience the plantation life. You experience the way of life of those who were not living in ancestral houses. And interestingly, you will see a different tradition, which is also rooted in our history. Like, let me share you with one tradition that is going. Before they would go to mass during the Spanish period. The farm workers would go to mass, and they would listen to the priest in the mass. When the mass is being celebrated in Latin, so that they won't understand. But they knew that Latins are prayers that will give them good luck or good fortune. So when they come back to their farming communities and they need to pray, they would mimic the Latin phrases being uttered by priests. So eventually that created a new form of prayer of deconstructed Latin, which you cannot hardly understand. But these were carried out for generations, and it's still present there, and that's part of our tours. And another significant part of the haciendero part of the tour is that usually the household staff, or the kasambahay of these ancestral houses, they would learn from the household delicacies, food, and cuisine. So I have to credit them for the preservation of our food heritage and food traditions, because when these personages passed away, or when the next generation has moved out or has not carried on the food traditions and food cultures, it was actually the people, the cocinera, the people in the kitchens, that were able to preserve the recipes of the families from the heritage houses. And now that they have moved out, they have already established themselves as restaurants, as delicacy producers, which is very active in Silay. Before the pandemic, we have food festivals during our fiestas, and what is very amusing is that the heirs or the next generation from these families no longer know how to produce this food delicacies and food, so they had to attend the food festivals to savor the very delicacies that are from their families, because these were carried out from those who came from their kitchens. Of course, most of them passed away, but they were able to teach it to the next generation. So this is going back to the community. It's going back. It's a really community effort.
Thank you for that. Now, for our dear viewers, if you have any questions, feel free to raise them. So for Zoom viewers, we have the chat button below or the Q&A button below. And for our Facebook viewers, feel free also to raise your questions in the comment section below. Right. So we have several questions actually from our audience. So I'd like to read some of them. So we have a question, for example, from Kia. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. So Kia Amador Echeverria. So what do you think are the possible initiatives for families that own heritage houses in ultra-modern cities such as Makati City? Unlike Silay, these houses are not even protected by ordinance, and their LGUs don't have any control over the protection of these houses. So what do you think?
Well, in the backdrop of an urban environment, ancestral houses are very welcome in the eyes, in the vibe. Even when looking at the woodwork, even looking at the craftsmanship, we are surrounded by brutalist architecture. We are unfortunately, most of our urban spaces are undergoing urban decay. So a restored ancestral house in the midst of this environment is a welcome sight, and it is also good for economics. Well, right now there's a generation that are into Instagram, into social media, and they look for those who engage their senses. So it's a feast of the eyes. If there's cuisine in that house, actually, if there's an ancestral house in an urban center, it's actually pinpointing something very unique. Because why is it there? What is the story behind that? What is the family behind in that house? And it could always be a welcome. It can always welcome the public as a break from its environment. It is always a challenge. It is always a challenge if economy comes in, if investment comes in. It's always a challenge. We recognize that challenge, but again, it goes back to significance and purpose.
Thank you for that. Now, earlier, the houses presented in your discussion were all pre-war. I wonder, how do you consider the heritage after the war, like post-war architecture from the 50s, from the 60s? Because we have a question here from Zoom. So what criteria must a house follow for it to qualify as an ancestral or heritage house? Is there a set of years that needs to be considered? Is there an architectural style that needs to be followed? Must these houses be the abodes of someone famous or significant, etc.? So what do you think?
Well, of course, all of these are governed by a national law. We refer back to the NHCP, the National Historical Commission, and other government agencies. So in Silay, most of the structures are pre-war, but we have quite some few structures after the war, which are post-war, which is mid-century in architecture with traces of Art Deco. Our post office building is post-war, our cultural center is post-war, and our city hall is post-war. And these there is no plans of demolishing it. So actually, there's a guideline by NHCP and NCCA to consider whether these houses have significance. So usually, like for example in Silay, we always follow clearance, especially if there's something major. Like one example is when we did McDonald's. The design was submitted to NHCP for final clearance. Also, when we did another house, for adaptive reuse. So we always coordinate with national government agencies to assist us. Of course, there's always debates on significance. So it goes back to how the community values these structures.
So you mean to say that every time there is a construction, every time that there is adaptive reuse, the approval of the NHCP is secured? Isn't that a little bit too bureaucratic?
At some point, John, like for major investments, especially for commercial purposes. But if it's not all, for example, if the family decides to turn it into a cafe, a restaurant, it's being cleared by the Heritage District Administration. But if big companies like Jollibee and McDonald's come in, especially there's significant alterations, and there's in the process of restoration, we have it cleared by the NHCP.
Thank you for that. We have a question from Keith Rivera. So there are many ancestral houses that were presented in the slides. May we know where we can find an inventory of these structures?
All of these structures are already submitted in NCCA, in our Philippine Registry for Cultural Property, but these are all readily available in our social media pages. They're always posted. You can drop your email to John so that we can coordinate.
Yeah,
and we can give you the official list.
We have a question here from Virginia Arnold. So this is a very specific question related to the question earlier. Wala po bang preserved na bahay na pang mahirap na from the same period?
Well, the middle class houses are meron, but for lack of a better term, usually they're made of light materials, so they don't really go through much in time. But in some places, although it's not original, but the way they fix it continues. Like for example, my example is the Central Hawaiian. It's Zucarera in Silay, and these are lodgings of employees, and they are a little more modest than what you were seeing in the photos, but they are maintained simply because they were maintained by the company. So ganon yung
I have a question here from Mary Joan Trevino. So, are there existing cultural or ancestral preservation initiatives the HES is conducting for LGUs to encourage the community preservation mindset? I'd like to sign up for our town in San Juan, Batangas. Thank you. So, What do you think?
So I recommend that you open our Facebook page, and we continue to engage with local governments as consultants. Yeah, we continue to monitor heritage conservation initiatives, and we always release a statement of significance if there are heritage issues, which are a lot lately. So, in behalf of HCS, just contact us to our social media page, and we are happy to accommodate your queries.
Thank you for that. Does Silay, no, does your hometown have a conservation management plan?
Yes, it's in our heritage ordinance. There's section in the heritage ordinance which is the implementing rules and regulations of the district, of the heritage district. So unfortunately, some of that hasn't been applied yet. I am looking forward, because I'm no longer part of the LGU. I'm looking forward to the implementation of signages, uh, uniform signages. There's a provision on that, and so many other things. And we are also looking forward to get rid of all the wires. So John and I were discussing it earlier. All the wires crossing over our heritage structures. It's all part of. Actually, it's not a plan in the IRR, but it's not yet 100% implemented. So
I just like to clarify on that. Does the CMP have any regulatory effect, or is it just purely recommendatory?
It's supposed to be regulatory, but we also adjust. We also adjust to the request. We cannot really enforce it entirely. There was a plan before to already brief the business owners when they register, but in terms of signages, pero wala, hindi pa natuloy. But eventually, I hope they can implement it. In terms of, like, for example, of the wires, well, all of the telecommunication companies and utility companies are aware that there were letters sent before. I hope they will act upon it. There are already talks of starting with the front of the church, which is the most recognizable in the town, the most noticeable in the town. It has not yet been implemented yet.
Thank you for that. We have a question from Mark, which is Celsius Cuento Huachon. So he's asking, there is a current trust in cultural discourses about polyphonic voices in the use of space. Formalists usually have spots in such spaces. How about folk and popular narratives in the use of space? How can Silay accommodate these different voices in heritage conservation?
Our school has special programs for the arts. These are public schools, John, which cater to the folk cultures. Like, actually, our festivals are all connected to folk stories, on legends. Even how Silay got its name, are all connected in this program. This is been ongoing for quite some time. It's usually through the Department of Education special program for the arts. That's why when I also mentioned earlier that the art and cultural scene is very alive. In Silay, of course, pre-pandemic, because the literary arts are still really part of our heritage. We have what we call binalaybais, composos, And if you remember what I shared earlier about those Latin chanting, these are all actually being already performed during the International Rondalia Festival, which we hosted 2 years ago. Some of these are documented. I, there's a cultural mapping done by UP Visayas before, especially in the intangible part of our heritage. So we also have focal persons on those that are very willing to share this. We call them our walking heritage resources, and they are in the process of putting all of this into writing. We have what we call the keepers of intangible heritage. I'm very engaged to have worked with some of them.
This question is related to the concept of sustainability. No? So, what kind of family of limited means, what can they do to ensure that their house, if, for example, they live in an ancestral house, what can they do to preserve their house? So, in the long run, I mean, considering that they don't have a lot of funds, budget, yeah.
Yeah, in the message of actually of this entire session, John, is household initiatives, because I will always believe it's part of heritage conservation should start from within. It should start from the home. And when we were in the Visayan consultations of the Philippine Heritage Charter, we recognize the role of these household conservation, simply because you don't need a huge resource to preserve if you find value in your living space. Um, if 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 a piece of your house falls apart, you don't need much to just fix it up. Um, it is an ongoing process. You take it day by day. But if you abandon that completely and it really fell apart, that's the part you can no longer afford. Cleanliness. It starts in cleanliness. It starts in basic restoration. It start. It's really it's not really that expensive if you come to think of it. Um, Ancestral houses are made of uh, good material, and this can last through ages. There are actually a couple of houses in Silay that fell apart simply because when the first piece fell down, nobody just cared. So if you start small, it becomes it becomes very affordable. I hope I answered that question.
Thank you for that.
And of course, in addition to that, there's the government. But I can only speak for Silay because we have exemptions from real estate tax, mga ganon. But actually, it's also encouraging local legislation. Encourage your local legislators to pass incentives for conservation.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that answer. Now, maybe for our last question for this episode. So, what is your message for the youth who would like to pursue cultural work as either an advocacy or a career?
Well, my message to the youth is that never stop speaking for heritage. It is very important. Heritage is, we always repeat, heritage is our identity. And if you come together and find in search of that common identity, you preserve your, it's very important. Just to share to you why so many heritage tracts and heritage districts um, are disappearing in this country is that we don't find a common identity. We don't find a collective significance on those properties. Uh, I'm sorry, but I have to give an example. Manila as an example. It is very challenging in Manila to preserve ancestral houses because Manila has become it it becomes a convergence of so many identities, so many cultures. We have people from all over Luzon coming to Manila for their careers, people from Visayas, from Mindanao, different dialects, different races, different cultures and traditions coming to Manila. So they don't identify to Manila because it's not simply not never their home. That's why localities are important. It was never their home. Uh, so they don't have attachments to the place. That is why there's heritage structures that are falling apart because they find attachment to the place. We have become, we're not a melting pot. Manila is not a melting pot of culture. It becomes a salad bowl. So we don't identify to the place. What is important is that we identify to the place. It is our nation's capital. So we have to find identity. We may find it in music, we may find it in stories, we may find it in places of significance, we will find it in built heritage. So that is my message, is that we continue to search for our identity. We continue to search for our collective identity, or what I call our common heritage. And maybe that's the way forward for our country. Uh, that is my message, especially to the youth, that we stop identifying through race, but we search for common heritage. And an example to that is in our localities. One community, like in Silay, decided to be a community. Gun are the if you're a hashindero, or if you're a sugarcane worker, or just a professional, you came into a one community, and then you discover that you have so much in common in heritage and identity.
Maraming salamat po. Now,
Thank you, John.
Before I close this webinar, I'd like to promote the social media channels of Intramuros Organization. So the IA is available in Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And for those who came in late, or for those who missed this episode, do not worry, because we are going to upload this episode in our YouTube channel. Just search for us, key in Intramuros Administration, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And I'd also like to promote our Google Arts and Culture page. So a lot of our museum collection, a lot of our artifacts have already been digitized and available for viewing in our Google Arts and Culture page. Just key in Intramuros Administration, and maybe similar to this, relevant to this present episode of the Intramuros Learning Sessions, we have an upcoming episode. So this is our 56th episode. This is on June 5. So this is about rebranding a heritage district. So this is a very interesting presentation on how a heritage district can keep up with the modern times. So we're going to have Sheena Botiwe of the Intramuros Administration, who's going to talk to us about Intramuros as a creative urban heritage district. This is part 3 of Protecting Intramuros. So for parts 1 and part 2, which all relate to the efforts of the Intramuros Administration in the management of the whole city, feel free to visit our YouTube channel to view our previous episode. So this episode is on June 5 at 3 p.m. So see you by then. Right. So thank you, Mr. Locsin, for that presentation. Before we end, would you like to say any final words, maybe?
So thank you, John. I would like to thank the Intramuros Administration for inviting me to the Intramuros Learning Session. The Heritage Conservation Society is very much happy to welcome everyone If you're interested, just visit our social media page. It's just Heritage Conservation Society, HCS. And just drop us a message. We have our email there. Then we can respond to your queries. I hope I was helpful, and eventually I hope we can help each other in heritage conservation. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, and see you in our next episode of the Intramuros Learning Sessions. Till next time po.